Following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers, this is the TFangy coming to you with what will hopefully be a successful review, and tonight we're going to be taking a look at not one but two Transformers action figures. As the title of the video has already revealed, it is the Transformers Legacy Evolution Leader Class Skyquake and Dreadwing figures. So yeah, these are the brothers from the Transformers Prime series. These are the largest of the Decepticon jets from Transformers Prime. And yes, these are Skyquake and Dreadwing, who are both released in the Legacy Evolution line. Yeah, I'm really thrilled to finally be getting around to reviewing these guys. Shout out to my good friend Ultra Megatronus on his live stream. I had told him that these would be the figures I would be reviewing next. That was over a week ago, and I apologize. A lot's been happening in my life, which prevented me from reviewing these figures when I originally wanted to. But yes, we will first take a look at the box of the figure that was released first, which is Skyquake. So yeah, here he is. There's some artwork of his robot mode and his jet mode. You got the same artwork of both the jet and robot mode here on this side of the box. You got the Legacy Evolution logo on the top. On this side, you got half the poster image for the Legacy Evolution line. And yes, this is the version of Skyquake from the Transformers Prime universe, but not entirely. So, quick story about who is Skyquake. In the Transformers Generation 1 line, Skyquake was a Decepticon who was the leader of a subgroup that were known as the Decepticon Predators, or the Predator Jets, and they were centered around a gimmick that Skyquake's original Generation 1 action figure had. He had this large cannon on the top of the fuselage of his jet mode, and there was a telescopic lens with a plastic mirror inside of it, and when you inserted the smaller Decepticon Predator jets on top of Skyquake, an image of an Autobot logo would appear inside Skyquake's cannon, and the idea is that was the Autobot the Decepticons were hunting down and trying to destroy permanently. Even I don't believe Skyquake appeared in the Transformers cartoon shows, primarily because his action figure was released very late in the Transformers Generation 1 line. I think the final year when the cartoon had also ended in Japan. And infamously, Skyquake's original Transformers Generation 1 action figure, it suffers horribly from gold plastic syndrome. And the entire Skyquake figure itself is not made out of gold plastic, but I believe Skyquake's robot mode chest, his arms, and most importantly of all, his telescope cannon that the Predator Jet gimmick was entirely centered around was made out of gold plastic. And so even if you managed to successfully attach a smaller Decepticon Predator Jet on top of Generation 1 Skyquake, if you tried to remove it, chances are Skyquake would crumble into a pile of gold dust. That's by the time you got the jet removed. So yeah, finding a fully attached Generation 1 Skyquake figure that hasn't succumbed to gold plastic syndrome is next to an impossibility. Fortunately for people who want to collect the Generation 1 Skyquake mold, Hasbro did release it 2 more times. Years after it was initially released, and I think Generation 1 Skyquake was released either in 1989 or 1990. Like I said, Skyquake was one of the last large-sized Decepticons released in the Generation 1 line. I believe it was 1998, 8 years after his G1 figure was released, the mold was released a second time as the Transformers Machine Wars version of Starscream. It was done almost entirely in I want to say a navy bluish-gray plastic with black highlights. Right, it was mostly black and gray, and many Transformers fans and collectors over the years who've recognized that it was Skyquake, they've tried to get the Machine Wars version of Starscream not only as that character, but as a stand-in for Generation 1 Skyquake, since his original figure suffers from gold plastic syndrome. Some Transformers fans and collectors were hoping that maybe perhaps the Legacy Evolution Skyquake mold will be used a third time on Machine Wars Starscream, or the third use of the Generation 1 Skyquake mold, which Hasbro released in 2003, 5 years after it was used on Machine Wars Starscream. The G1 Skyquake mold was used a third time on an action figure that was released in the original Transformers Universe line named King Atlas. That was basically a modern version of the Generation 1 character of Atlas, and by the time the year 2003 the world was living in the year 2003, due to modern safety regulations and advancements in transforming robot action figure technology. The Generation 1 Die Atlas mold, rather than releasing it in the United States, Hasbro found it was much cheaper and more cost-effective to use the Generation 1 Skyquake mold once again, like they had done on Machine Wars Starscream, and they used it on a quote-unquote a new version of Die Atlas, and they couldn't get a trademark name on Die Atlas here in the United States, so they decided to rename him King Atlas. That, I guess, and basically that was Generation... For those of you who are familiar with Generation 1 Skyquake, it was Skyquake and Die Atlas's paint job. The jet mode was primarily white with black highlights, and the robot mode had blue parts and red parts as well for the robot mode, chest and the arms and legs. Okay, so for those of you wondering out there, yes, technically Die Atlas has two Transformers is one of the few characters to technically have two Transformers Generation 1 action figures. There's his original Generation 1 Powered Master figure that Takara Tomy exclusively released in Japan in 1990, and then Die Atlas got a Generation 1 action figure to a point by Hasbro when, in the original Transformers Universe line in 2003, Hasbro released King Atlas, which was Generation 1 Skyquake in Generation 1 Die Atlas's paint job. So yeah, this mold not only can be used a third time on Machine Wars Starscream, but if Hasbro wanted to do a callback to that Transformers Universe King Atlas action figure, they could use this mold also to make King Atlas if they wanted to release Die Atlas under the trademark name that Hasbro gave him in 2003. So yeah, that's just a history on Generation 1 Skyquake. And the reason why I brought that up and why I said that this figure isn't entirely Transformers Prime Skyquake, the jet mode out on Skyquake, which you can see here close up with the product photo on the back of the box. The jet mode, especially these intake vents on the top of the fuselage, sculpted on the top of the fuselage, and the overall pointed design. The top center area of the fuselage for Skyquake's jet mode. This is based more off of Generation 1 Skyquake. So in jet mode, at least, the Legacy Evolution version of Skyquake, rather than being completely based off of the original Prime Skyquake figure that was released on the Transformers Prime line in 2012. It's a mashup of both the Transformers Prime and Generation 1 versions of Skyquake. Some Transformers hardcore Generation 1 fans are still hopeful that we'll get an action figure based off of Generation 1 Skyquake, since, as it states here on the box for the Legacy Evolution line, this figure of Skyquake is based more on his Transformers Prime version. So whether or not Hasbro will release a dedicated action figure that's a dedicated update to Transformers Generation 1 Skyquake no longer suffering from Go Plastic Syndrome, time will tell at this point. Most of the databases of the Transformers action figures that are coming out next year in 2026, and even some of the ones that Hasbro and Takara Tomy have planned for release in 2027 have either come out or they're starting to slowly be leaked onto the internet before the official announcements, which these days that's typical of that to happen. It gives fans and collectors a preview of what Transformers action figures to expect the following year. And so Generation 1 Skyquake is not one of the characters listed as coming up on Transformers characters coming out in the near future. So for those wanting modern day action figure of Generation 1 Skyquake, you have to use a stretch of the imagination and imagine that the Legacy Evolution figure represents both Transformers Generation 1 and Transformers Prime Skyquake. And as a callback to Skyquake's, and for those who don't believe me that the center of the fuselage is based off of Generation 1 Skyquake, the main gimmick that Skyquake has as a Transformers action figure is right here on the box. There's a couple of rectangular pegs that match up with some rectangular ports on the underside of the jet mode for Transformers Legacy Needle Nose, who was sold separately. And you can attach a needle nose to the O's on top of Skyquake and a Quake, and so that's a callback to his Generation 1 action figure's gimmick of being the leader of the Predator jets. And so yeah, if you can do that if you desire. It also works with the figure that Needle Nose is mold mates with, a Windsweeper. So yeah, if you want to mimic the Generation 1 Predator Jet gimmick, you can do that as well without the telescope and just have the jet on top of a jet if you desire. So here are the product photos of Skyquake in his robot mode and his jet mode. Once again, 29 steps just to transform them, and the stupid, useless Evo Fusion gimmick from the Legacy Evolution line is that you can combine Skyquake's two weapons of a laser gun and a sword and make a massive weapon, and that's a callback to his original Transformers Prime action figure. So that was the background information on Generation 1 Skyquake I shared, and so for his Transformers Prime version, a Skyquake appeared in one solitary episode of the Transformers Prime cartoon, and by the end of the episode he was murdered by Megatron. If I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've watched the Transformers Prime cartoon, so I probably should have looked the information up before I started recording the review. But yeah, Skyquake appeared in just one solitary episode of the Transformers Prime cartoon series, and in the original Transformers Prime line of Transformers action figures released in 2012, of which this figure is mostly takes a lot of design cues from, right down to his two weapons of the a laser gun and the sword, which I'll explain in more detail in just a moment. In the Transformers Prime line of action figures, Skyquake, a lot of Transformers fans and collectors wondered if he'd be given an action figure because a couple of episodes after Skyquake's the solitary episode where he appeared in, a few episodes later, his brother Dreadwing arrived on the scene and lasted several episodes throughout Season 2 before he was finally defeated by, I believe, Megatron. And so, yeah, like I said, it's been a while since I've watched the Transformers Prime cartoon, so please correct me down in the comment section if I'm wrong, but I believe both of these guys, Skyquake and Dreadwing, they were both murdered by Megatron in the Transformers Prime series. So, we'll get to Skyquake in just a moment, but here is Dreadwing in his box. Skyquake was, I believe, released in Wave 1 of Legacy Evolution, and Dreadwing, I believe, was released in Wave 3. And there was an issue with Skyquake where the hooks that peg his wings onto his back in robot mode, they didn't quite fit in place properly unless you transformed his cockpit a special way. Hasbro and Takara, the designers, fixed that for Dreadwing, so Dreadwing is slightly modified. From Skyquake, and that his backpack locks in place better than Skyquake's does. Yeah, here's some artwork of Dreadwing in his robot mode and his jet mode. You got the same artwork here for the side of the box. And unlike Skyquake, who's mostly green, Dreadwing is mostly blue with yellow highlights. And a lot of Transformers fans and collectors have said they enjoy Dreadwing's paint job a lot more than they do Skyquake's, and I tend to agree. On the side of the box here, you've got half the poster image for the Legacy Evolution line. And on that note, if you actually have both Dreadwing and Skyquake have their boxes, they have the opposite halves of the poster image for the Legacy Evolution line. So if you have Dreadwing and Skyquake, the two Decepticon Predator Jet brothers, then their boxes can complete the poster image for the Legacy Evolution line, so that's really fun to see that. Coming around here to the back of the box, you got Dreadwing and his product photos. You got the jet mode, robot mode. He transforms back and forth between both modes in 29 steps, just like Skyquake. Oddly enough, because, as I believe by the time Dreadwing was released, Needle Nose was no longer available on the shelf. Even though he's a straight-up repaint of Skyquake, Dreadwing doesn't show on the back of his box. He doesn't advertise the gimmick of being able to combine with Needle Nose or Windsweeper, but he can't. But the figure is a straight-up repaint of Skyquake, so he can do that. And he comes with two weapons as well, a laser gun and a sword. And despite the modification for the transformation, Dreadwing and Skyquake, they are straight-up repaints of each other, so the figures themselves have no mold differences, but there is one mold difference between the two of them, and it is the barrels of their laser guns. The gun barrel of Skyquake's laser gun has a Gatling gun, and Dreadwing's laser gun has a single barrel cannon on the front of it, and you can even see it on the box art for Dreadwing, where he's using the laser gun weapon, which is a single barrel cannon. Skyquake's portrayed wielding his sword. So yeah, it's kind of a. I personally find it enjoyable that on the box art that they're wielding only one of the weapons that they come packaged with, but it's the weapon that the other one is not using. And even though they're facing the same direction, they're done in completely different action poses, and the position of the jet modes are also off. So they are brothers, others from the Transformers Prime series, but they're not identical twins, so they don't quite do everything entirely the same. And even though they share the same body design. But yeah, even though the action figures themselves don't have any there's no actual differences between mold differences between Dreadwing and Skyquake. They do come with opposite weapons, and I had started to talk about that with Skyquake a few seconds ago, and that's a callback to their original Transformers Prime action figures. So I'll do a proper size comparison when I get the figures out of their boxes, but I happen to have the original Transformers Prime Voyager class action figures of Skyquake and Dreadwing. In the original Transformers Prime line, opposite of the order in which they appeared in the Transformers Prime cartoon, which the release of their Legacy Evolution figures matched up with, in the original Transformers Prime line of action figures in 2012, Dreadwing was released before Skyquake was. Dreadwing was released, I believe, in Wave 2 of the Transformers Prime line back in 2012. And a lot of Transformers fans and collectors, since Skyquake had appeared in the Prime cartoon before Dreadwing, a lot of Transformers fans and collectors wondered if Dreadwing was going to be repainted into Skyquake, just like in the Prime cartoon. And sure enough, Hasbro surprised Transformers fans and collectors everywhere when, during the fourth and final wave of the original Transformers Prime line in 2012, Dreadwing was in fact repainted and retooled into Skyquake. And when I say retooled, the reason why the Legacy Evolution versions of these guys have the barrels of their laser guns are different is it's a callback to the weapons that the Prime Voyager class action figures had. The weapons that the Hasbro released versions of the Voyager class figures in the Transformers Prime line had, they were known as Powerizer weapons. And what you do is there's a large lever on the back. And you just point it down, and then it straightens out the weapon, and it comes a giant cannon. They originally lit up. The batteries on my copies of Dreadwing and Skyquake need to be replaced. They use alkaline batteries, which are the small silver disc-shaped ones. And so I might buy new batteries someday, but yeah, I'm sorry I can't show off the light-up gimmick right now since the batteries inside are dead. But yeah, that's the gimmick with the weapon for them here. Dreadwing, since he was the first figure in the Prime line to be released, the barrel of his Powerizer weapon was a single-barreled cannon weapon, and Hasbro decided to swap that out, and instead of the Powerizer weapon for Skyquake being a straight-up repaint, the barrel of the weapon was changed and turned into a Gatling gun for Skyquake. And so, if you were to remove the barrels of their Powerizer Skyquake and Dreadwing's Powerizer weapons, then you'd have two copies of the exact same figure done in different colors. So, yeah, it's interesting that Hasbro decided that the actual Skyquake and Dreadwing Transformers Prime figures themselves have no mold differences, but the barrels of their laser gun Powerizer weapons are different details. Also, yeah, that's why the Legacy Evolution figures have those different gun barrels. It's a callback to the original Prime figures having different gun barrels on their laser guns. So for Dreadwing, as I said, he's mostly blue with yellow highlights, and so it matches the color of the cockpit matches the gun barrel of the Powerizer weapon. And in addition to the Powerizer weapons themselves, as you probably saw, Skyquake and Dreadwing, their Prime action figures come with the exact same sword, and it's literally the exact same sword. So since Dreadwing was the first one released, it's a unpainted gray sword, so visually it looks kind of dull. Oh, and because the Powerizer weapon, the gimmick was designed for younger Transformers fans and collectors. Most older adult-age Transformers fans and collectors find the Powerizer weapons to be a goofy looking thing, both in in his overall design and as a weapon for a Transformers action figure. And that's the thing with the Power Rise weapons here, as I let go of it. As you can see right there, they don't lock into place in firing mode. And so, if you don't touch it at all, this is what it looks like. And yeah, that's kind of silly looking no matter how you look at it. Skyquake, his clear the parts of him that are clear plastic are red. So basically yellow was swapped out from Dreadwing for red on Skyquake. But the swords are virtually identical. They are the exact same gray plastic. So if you were to take the swords off of Skyquake and Dreadwing's Prime action figures and blindfold yourself, then toss them in the air, and not taking your blindfold off until they've fallen down to the floor. If you were to pick them up without knowing which sword originally came from Skyquake and which one came from Dreadwing, and not recording a video of yourself doing that, you could end up permanently swapping the swords between the two of them. The color of the swords and the Power Riser weapons here, the Power Riser weapons being either red or yellow, and then the swords being the same gray plastic. That was the inspiration for the color of the weapons on the Legacy Evolution versions of Skyquake and Dreadwing. It's a callback to the color of the weapons that their original Prime Voyager class action figures had. And on that note, one thing that I personally have a personal gripe with is that what Hasbro did for the Legacy Evolution versions of the Prime Predator jets. Is that because the swords on Skyquake and Dreadwing's Prime figures were both originally unpainted gray plastic, Hasbro and Takara Tomy decided to swap the colors for the Legacy Evolution figures and have the laser guns and the swords be opposite of what the original Prime figures were. The laser guns were colored weapons, and then the swords were unpainted gray weapons. And so the laser gun weapons for both the Legacy Evolution versions of Dreadwing and Skyquake are painted in the same gunmetal gray paint as each other, and then the swords are made out of painted plastic. But one thing I kind of wish they would have done with Dreadwing I wish they would have made the clear parts on him yellow, just like on his original Transformers Prime action figure, because the yellow highlights that Dreadwing has, like with the Air Force style Decepticon insignias on his wings, and then the yellow striping on there. He looks like an evil version of a Blues Angel fighter jet. That's what I've always viewed Prime Dreadwing as looking like that. But I kind of wish they would have gone the extra mile and done the clear parts on Dreadwing's Legacy Evolution figure clear yellow plastic instead of clear red plastic, like they did for Skyquake. I think the reason why they did that was to acknowledge the fact that the swords were virtually identical in the transform on the original Prime action figures, as I said, but because they basically changed which weapons were colored versus which ones were just gray, I think it would have been a more fun callback to the original Prime figures having Dreadwing's sword and the cockpit of his Legacy Evolution figure be done in yellow, like on his original Prime figure, instead of red, just like Skyquake. But as I said, that's just my own personal gripe with the Legacy Evolution action figures. And with that said, that's pretty much all the background information on Dreadwing and Skyquake. I babbled on much longer than I wanted to, and let's get these guys finally unboxed and take a close look at what they look like in the modes they're packaged in. And from reviews I've seen on the internet, I believe they come packaged in jet mode, since the jet mode sits flatter than the robot mode, since the wings end up on the back, act as a backpack. And so there's more depth to the robot modes for Dreadwing and Skyquake than the jet modes. So let's take a close look at these guys in their alt modes. Alright, and so here are Dreadwing and Skyquake out of their boxes and transformed into their jet modes, which are the modes they come packaged in. And yeah, they are really impressive. One thing I like on Dreadwing is that they did the same, the gold Decepticon United States Air Force logo on his wings, like his original Prime figure there. Skyquake, his original Prime figure, had those same symbols as Dreadwing on his original Prime figure, just done in silver instead of gold. Unfortunately, they didn't do that on the new Legacy Evolution figure here. I guess they figured, since they were trying to make Skyquake look like a hybrid of, or a mashup rather, of both his Generation 1 and Transformers Prime action figures, they didn't see the need to include paint jobs from his Prime figure, and so that's why I said at the start of the review, for Skyquake, instead of being an entirely dedicated update to his Transformers Prime action figure, he's a mashup of both his Generation 1 and Transformers Prime action figures. The second cockpit up here on the back, on the top back area, the fuselage right there, that's a callback to how his Generation 1 action figure looked with the cannon. And up here on the back where you insert the smaller Decepticon Predator jets on top. Up and activate the gimmick here. On a flat surface, Skyquake is a little wobbly, Dreadwing as well. And that's because the only weapon storage for their laser gun weapons is here on the underside of the fuselage. So unlike their original Prime figures with the weapons stored on top, they store here on the bottom now. And as you can see there, just like their original Transformers Prime Voyager class action figures, the actual figure Dreadwing and Skyquake action figures themselves, there's no sculpted differences between them. But the barrels of their laser guns are different. Skyquake has a Gatling gun, while Dreadwing has a cannon. And it's like I said, not much difference. No differences between Dreadwing and Skyquake themselves, but the barrels of their weapons are done differently. And unlike their original Transformers Prime action figures, who didn't have opening cockpits, the cockpits were kept permanently shut. You can open up the cockpits here on the Legacy Evolution figures, and you got two seats sculpted there inside the cockpit. Now that I have them out of the boxes, they aren't the same. The cockpits aren't made out of the same shade of red plastic. Skyquake's is clearer than Dreadwing's. Dreadwing has a smokier, more opaque shade of red plastic for the cockpit of his jet mode. Oh, but it is nice to see that there. And like I said, it's just a minor gripe for me personally, but I wish they would have. Hasbro and Takara would have gone the extra mile and done the clear plastic bits on Dreadwing. I wish they would have done the yellow like his original Transformers Prime action figure. Flipping away the landing gear so you can see what they look like when they're flying. If you were to remove their laser gun weapons, and they are pretty decent looking fighter jets. Adjusting my camera and moving it back so we can get a better picture here. And yeah, so yeah, they are pretty impressive looking jets. Here's a close-up of Skyquake, and here is Dreadwing. I love that they included the Decepticon Air Force insignias on his wings there. Wish they would have done it here for Skyquake. I haven't seen any videos, admittedly, of their the Repro Label sticker sheets that Toy Hacks has come out with, but I believe one of the stickers options for Skyquake is the Decepticon Air Force design that his Prime figure had. And speaking of which, since I brought them out earlier, I'm going to redeploy their landing gear here so they won't wobble on me too badly. And it is nice that it's not just the landing gear under the nose cone, that they have actual landing gear under the wings as well. That can deploy and redeploy. So bringing them there. For a size comparison, here are Skyquake and Dreadwing's tilting my camera down so I can get it on this full screen as much as possible. But for a size comparison, here they are. Adjusting my camera a bit here. Here they are next to their original. Should have grabbed it by the figure instead of the terrorizer weapon, which would have been more helpful, which would have been more, at least made more sense. But here are Legacy Evolution, Skyquake and Dreadwing next to their original Transformers Prime Voyager class action figures, and I had no idea that they would be closer in size. So put Dreadwing off to a size here, so that's all 4 of them here. So first size comparison here is Legacy Evolution Skyquake next to his original. He's a leader class figure, and here is Legacy Evolution Leader class Skyquake next to his original Transformers Prime Voyager class Skyquake figure. And I forgot to touch on this earlier in the review. Skyquake, I said he was released in the final wave of the Prime Voyager class figures that were released in 2012, and he was released in, I believe, wave 4 of the Transformers Prime Voyager class sized figures. And Skyquake here, he was not only released in the final wave of the mainline Transformers Prime series before the following in 2012, before the next year in 2013 when the line was switched to Prime Beast Hunters for the Transformers Prime series 3rd season. Skyquake was the very last Voyager class figure released under the original Transformers Prime RID banner before it was switched to Beast Hunters, and because of that, he is what's known as a tail-end Transformers action figure. Basically, figures that are released at the tail end of the final wave, the final individual figures of an existing Transformers Prime line. Retailers will shove the final wave aside to make way for the first wave of the succeeding line of Transformers action figures, and because of that, Skyquake is one of the most hard to find Transformers Prime action figures out there in the world. Back in 2012, when he was first released, I was one of the lucky Transformers fans and collectors. My local Toys R Us store at the time, in 2012, had gotten not 1, but 2 copies of Skyquake, and they shelf warmed for the first couple of weeks that they were there because I saw them a couple of times because I wasn't interested in Skyquake at first. First, because I didn't like his mostly green paint job, but then after I saw him the first time, a couple of times, but then when I started to watch reviews of him and everyone was saying that he was hard to find, people were having trouble finding him everywhere, I quickly went back to my local Toys R Us store. 1 copy had already sold, there was only 1 left, and so I grabbed it up. And so, after this version of Skyquake that I bought for myself, I did see another copy of Skyquake one more time a couple months later at another Toys R Us store, I was lucky enough back in 2012, back when his original Prime Voyager class figure released, I was lucky enough that I was able to find Skyquake and add him to my Transformers collection. At the time when Skyquake was released for the first time, I hadn't really been collecting action figures from the Transformers Prime line, which is why I passed on him at first. But Skyquake here was the one who, one of the first Transformers Prime Voyager class figures that I added to my Transformers collection. And actually, he wasn't the very first, but just like his Legacy Evolution action figure, for me personally, since I wasn't collecting Transformers Prime action figures, I didn't start until after I had added Skyquake to my Transformers collection. Unlike most Transformers fans and collectors who were collecting the Transformers Prime action figures back in 2012, I have the rare and exclusive honor of opportunity to say that, for lack of better vocabulary and for the sake of time and grammar, I actually got Skyquake and added him to my Transformers collection first before I got the figure that he's repainted and retooled from, which is Prime Dreadwing. So yeah, on both occasions, for me personally, for both versions of Skyquake and Dreadwing, the original Prime Voyager class figures and the Legacy Evolution Leader class figures, I got Skyquake first on both times. So yeah, I bought Skyquake's I got his Transformers Prime action figure before I got Dreadwing. So just like his Legacy Evolution action figure, from my personal experience, Skyquake was my first rendition of the molds before I picked up Dreadwing. So yeah, that's most Transformers fans and collectors out there cannot say that they got Prime Skyquake before they got Dreadwing, because most fans and collectors were eager to get Dreadwing when he was first released. And the main reason for that, as I said, is because in the Prime cartoon, Skyquake appeared first, and he lasted only one episode before he was defeated, and then Dreadwing came sometime later, and he lasted a couple episodes longer than Skyquake did, but Dreadwing got his action figure released in the Prime line first before Skyquake did. So yeah, that's my own personal experience with Skyquake and Dreadwing. Unlike the Legacy Evolution figures, where the landing gear both under the wings and under the nose cone, they can be deployed and be retracted when you do them for flight mode. On the original Prime Voyager class mold, the rear landing gear, which ends up on the ankles of Skyquake and Dreadwing's robot mode, they're permanently sculpted right here, and so they're permanently deployed. And so when you put the original Prime Voyager class Dreadwing and Skyquake figures into flight mode, and you put up the landing gear for the nose cone, that's it. You just fold up the landing gear for the nose cone, and that's the difference between flying and not flying. Eyeing for the Voyager class figures. So in that regard of having retractable landing gear, the Legacy Evolution Leader class figures of Skyquake and also Dreadwing, they have the Legacy Evolution Leader class figures have the original Voyager class figures beat out. So, like I said, in the original Transformers Prime line, Dreadwing was released first and Skyquake second. And to make Skyquake and Dreadwing more twins and more lookalikes of each other, I don't know the actual reason, but yeah, as you can see here, comparing Legacy Evolution Leader class Dreadwing with his original Voyager class Transformers Prime Dreadwing action figure, just like Skyquake, the parts of him made out of clear plastic are red, just like Skyquake, instead of being yellow like his original Prime action figure. And like I said, that's just a minor gripe, just a minor nitpick I have. Visually, Dreadwing doesn't have as many gold or yellow highlights now compared to his original figure. There's even folding around here to the back. When you transform the original Prime Dreadwing figure into his robot mode, he's got this yellow gold paint here on the shins of his robot mode legs. So he has a lot more yellow highlights than his more recent Legacy Evolution Leader class action figure does. But it is nice that the Decepticon Air Force paint apps are on the wings of both figures. So one nice thing that they did do is that it's kind of hard for my camera to pick it up, but if I put him at this angle, Dreadwing had his Prime figure has these silver stripes on the front of his wingtips, and his Legacy Evolution figure has that as well. Skyquake, his Prime figure had some silver paint apps around the fuselage of his cockpit. His Legacy Evolution figure kind of sort of has that as well, but it's not as prominent a shade of silver compared to that. But yeah, as far as I can tell, Dreadwing, he has a lot of paint apps on him as well. It fell off a moment ago when I put him up here on my review table. But if you look here, the back of Dreadwing's cockpit section, the cockpit actually ends right here where my fingertip is, but the post where you put his powerized weapon is made out of the same clear yellow plastic as his cockpit. And as I said, on the original Prime Voyager class figures, the cockpits, you can't open and close them. They're permanently locked in place there. As here on the Transformers Prime action figures, there's no sculpted detailing there inside either, so the Legacy Evolution figures have the original Prime Voyager class figures beat up in that detailed highlights, but it's kind of the reason why I point out this yellow bit right here is because Dreadwing, Hasbro at least acknowledged the fact that his original Prime figure had a mostly yellow cockpit section by painting this yellow sculpted detailing on the nose cone owned for his Legacy Evolution figure. So yeah, the yellow is now on the front of the cockpit instead of behind the cockpit compared to his original Prime Voyager class action figure. So just wanted to show that off to you guys. Nice. One thing that, for me personally, I believe is a definite improvement compared to their original Prime action figures is that Dreadwing and Skyquake, because of safety standards at the time in 2012, the tail fins of their jet modes, they are made out of, as you can see with my hand here, the tail fins of the jet mode are made out of soft rubbery plastic on the original Prime figures. Skyquake's tail fins are made out of the same thing here, and so it's nice that the tail fins are made out of solid plastic on the new Legacy Evolution action figures. One last thing that I will say about Dreadwing is that technically for both him and Skyquake, the Transformers Prime action figures, the shades of green and blue plastic used on them are much darker shades than compared to their Legacy Evolution figures. As you can see here for Skyquake, putting the Skyquake right here, he has a much darker, more like emerald green plastic that his original Prime figure is made of, while his new Legacy Evolution figure, it's kind of like a lighter, more grass green on his Legacy Evolution figure. And it's the same thing here for Dreadwing. His original Prime Voyager class action figure, the blue plastic is almost a navy blue plastic, while here on his Legacy Evolution figure it's a much brighter cobalt blue. So the plastic is a much brighter and more eye-catching on the Legacy Evolution figures. So setting the Voyager class figures aside, bringing back Skyquake. Like I said, on the back of it's advertised on the back of Skyquake's box, but not Dreadwing's. But like I said, the only difference is the gun barrels of their laser guns. So the main gimmick that they have in jet mode is that these rectangular pegs that they have here on the very top of their fuselage, if you fold the tail fins down, and you can see it there on Skyquake's a little better. The main gimmick is that you can take needle nose and there's 4 rectangular ports here on Needle Nose's robot mode chest, and so the rectangular pegs on Skyquake and Dreadwing line up with those ports, and you can take nose cone and the other version of him that's been the only other version of his mold that's been used so far, a wind sweeper. Or so you can take a needle nose and wind sweeper, and if I can get it to line up properly. Not pretty. So you can take them and plug them onto the back of Dreadwing and Skyquake, and that's a callback to Skyquake's Generation 1 gimmick of the Decepticon Predator jets, where you'd insert one on top of Skyquake, and Skyquake, his Generation 1 cannon, it had a little plastic mirror and a telescopic lens that ends. In the smaller Decepticon Predator jets, they had images of Autobot opponents posted on them, and so we inserted the smaller Decepticon Predator jets on top of Skyquake. The mirror would reflect the image off of the smaller Predator jets, and the telescopic lens would allow you to see which Autobot the Predators are hunting down and trying to destroy. And so Needle Nose and Wind Sweeper being able to sit on top of Skyquake and Dreadwing is a callback to that Predator jet gimmick. But with the telescope gimmick and the Predator jet gimmick now removed, pretty much all it is a smaller jet riding on top of a larger jet. And because of the sculpted design right here, I saw a handful of Transformers Generation 2 fans for Dreadwing. After his Generation 1, Dreadwing was technically his name was used in the Transformers Generation 1 franchise. Dreadwing wasn't technically an individual Decepticon. He was just the name of the combined jet mode of the two Decepticon Power Masters of Dreadwind and Blackwing. They could combine their jet modes into a large jet, and they called themselves Dreadwing. They couldn't combine into a robot mode or anything like that. But the combined jet mode for Generation 1, Dreadwind and Blackwing, was recycled into the Generation 2 line a few years later in the 90s, and was the name of a large Decepticon who transformed into an F1 Nighthawk stealth fighter jet. And in Generation 2 Dreadwing, he was a fairly large Transformers action figure, but he came partnered with a smaller Decepticon jet that, unfortunately, Hasbro decided to hold on to a trademark called G2 Dreadwing's jet partner Decepticon Smokescreen. But you can combine them together, and they activated all sorts of weapons and features, and so the jet sitting on top of the jet, technically it's not just a callback to Generation 1 Skyquake, it's also a callback to Generation 2 Dreadwing. And so I saw a handful of Transformers fans and collectors back in 2023 when Skyquake and Dreadwing were released. Some fans and collectors wondered if this mold, in addition to, as I said earlier, Machine Wars Starscream and Transformers Universe King Atlas, if the mold could be used to repaint, could be used again also for Generation 2 Dreadwing, then the mold used for Needlenose and Windsweeper, it could also potentially be used for Generation 2 Decepticon Smokescreen, and then you could have the Generation 2 Dreadwing and Smokescreen jet combos here are using this mold as well. Pretty much all they'd have to do is do the molds in purple plastic, and then you'd have Generation 2 Dreadwing and Smokescreen. And so that's why I put Needlenose on top of Dreadwing here, because if these guys were purple instead of blue, then they'd be a nice callback to Generation 2 Dreadwing and Smokescreen's combined jet mode as well. Although I do know of Generation 2 Dreadwing and Smokescreen, and I do acknowledge the fact that the jets didn't sit on top of each other. There was a hollowed out space on the back of G2 Dreadwing's fuselage, and Smokescreen would plug in there and basically not only fill in the fuselage, but he'd also act like a rocket booster for Dreadwing to use to make him fly faster. So technically a proper jet combo would be having Smokescreen on the back of Dreadwing for the Generation 2 gimmicks, but still, if this mold had been used for Generation 2 Dreadwing and Smokescreen, painting the leader class figure into Generation 2 Dreadwing and painting the Needlenose mold into Generation 2 Decepticon Smokescreen, I would have bought that in a heartbeat. So yeah, Dreadwing and Skyquake, their Legacy Evolution figures, being able to combine with Needlenose and Windsweeper in jet mode, it's gimmicks to how past action figures of them would combine with smaller jet. That's a pretty exciting callback to the gimmick of Decepticon on jets being able to combine in vehicle mode in the past. So that's pretty much all there's to say about Dreadwing and Skyquake when they're in their jet modes, so let's get them transformed into their robot modes and wrap up the review. Alright, and so here are Dreadwing and Skyquake transformed into their robot modes, and between the two of them, Dreadwing is my personal favorite of the two. Not just because I prefer the mostly blue paint job of Dreadwing, and I like the more prominent Decepticon Air Force logo on his chest compared to the standard purple logo on Skyquake's chest, with, unfortunately, lately Hasbro and Takara have been trying to match the animation models from the Sunbow Productions Transformers Generation 1 cartoon, where the Autobot and Decepticon logos don't have any outline frames on them. They're just the frameless logo on the Transformers characters, and I actually don't like that. I actually prefer when there's an outline frame on the faction symbols, because it helps you to find the faction symbol more prominently versus not having a frame on it. Now, I did say at the start of the review Hasbro and Takara did modify the mold for Dreadwing when you transform it, and for my copies of Dreadwing and Skyquake, unfortunately that is true. My copy of Skyquake is a floppy mess with the backpack. For the rest of the review, what I actually did is I unpegged the hinge joint that actually attaches his backpack to his torso, but he kept wanting to fall back, so I did have to angle him forward slightly. So yeah, Dreadwing definitely is the better version of the mold. Also, my copy of Skyquake, this one wing panel right here, which ends up at the top of it, which ends up becoming a shoulder spike. It keeps wanting to pop off and fall off. I try off apparently when it was at the factory, and I could actually hear it rattling around inside the box over the last 2 years that I've owned Skyquake. Like apparently one of the little pegs that keeps it in place, too much of it was shaved off in production, and so it just doesn't want to hang on. So I'm strongly debating about if I should even bother to buy a duplicate copy of Skyquake. I thought I heard a rumor that supposedly Skyquake, like that later versions of him, my copy's an early version of Skyquake, but I thought I read on the internet that supposedly later editions of releases of Legacy Skyquake had the same modification as Dreadwing, so the backpack transforms correctly. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm strongly considering it. So one way to tell, and a lot of people have pointed this out, if you look here on the side of Skyquake, this little green bit right here behind my finger, which is the nose cone, and this piece right here, which is the hinge joint that connects the backpack to Skyquake's torso, they're supposed to line up flat just like this, but normally it doesn't sit flat. The nose cone sits down lower, and that makes Skyquake become a really floppy mess and want to fall all over the place, not have his backpack clip into place properly. Hasbro and Takara told me modified the hinge joints on Dreadwing's backpack so he does transform correctly on here, so they at least were able to fix it for Dreadwing. But like I said, I heard a rumor that they had fixed it for later releases of Skyquake. I don't know if it's true or not. But yeah, I really hope that they did end up fixing it ultimately, because have a lot of Transformers fans and collectors have tried to modify Skyquake to get him to transform properly, and even then it still doesn't clip in place properly, because apparently the clips that hold the wings to the sides of the that fold into the interior of the backpack, the clips are weak on Skyquake. Hasbro and Takara told me made them stronger on Dreadwing. So Dreadwing transforms properly, but Skyquake unfortunately does not. So that is a case where the repaint and retool ended up being a better version than the original figure due to the transformation mods that had to be done. And like I said, the main difference between Dreadwing and Skyquake, they themselves are straight up repaints of each other, but the only sculpted difference are the barrels of their laser guns. Skyquake has a Gatling gun and Dreadwing a cannon. But yeah, I really enjoy the paint jobs on them both, even though I enjoy Dreadwing's paint job a lot more than I do Skyquake's. So lowering their laser guns to the ground. And the problem is that my table isn't sitting flat. I have to move back a bit. Okay, there we go. Hopefully they won't fall into my face again. But for some special size comparisons, here are the Legacy Evolution Leader Class versions of Dreadwing and Skyquake. Here they are compared to their Voyager Class action figures. And yeah, the Voyager Class action figures, while they are, one could argue, more screen accurate to their appearances in the Transformers Prime cartoon, in terms of transformation, even though I spent an hour trying to get Skyquake to transform properly, and he's still not transforming correctly. Actually, I was able to transform Dreadwing correctly, and in terms of what is the less frustrating transformation, even when it's not done properly for the Legacy Evolution figures, they are still much easier to transform than the original Prime Voyager Class action figures. The original Transformers Prime versions of Dreadwing and Skyquake, if you don't transform them correctly, then getting them into jet mode and into robot mode is a nightmare. And I was actually hesitant transforming these guys out of their jet modes into their robot modes for this size comparison. But yeah, it's but yeah, the Legacy Evolution figures are far easier to transform than these original Voyager class figures are. And one thing to note about the original Prime Voyager class figures is that the Legacy Evolution figures, they do have light piping in the top of the heads, but what Hasbro did back in the day in 2012 for the Transformers Prime action figures, because of all the spikes on the head sculpt for this mold, to make it to meet safety standards, the exterior of the head sculpt on the original Prime mold, it's actually made entirely out of soft rubbery plastic. It's similar to the T-Rex head sculpt on the Transformers War for Cybertron Trilogy Kingdom Leader Class Beast Wars Megatron, how the T-Rex head, the parts that were supposed to be flesh, were made out of rubbery plastic. That same type of rubbery plastic is used here on the exterior of the head for Dreadwing and Skyquake. And on Skyquake, because he was the repainted, ain't not the original mold on these figures, the light piping, which you can see there on the back of the head, part of the light piping is the eyeballs. So the eyeballs are actually separate pieces from the eye socket, as you can see here. Here I'm trying to visually represent it here with my fingers. So when you rotate the head, the eye sockets actually move back and forth move separate from the eyeballs. And so on the Dreadwing version of this mold, the ball joint on his neck is so stiff that some Transformers fans and collectors, when they've tried to rotate Dreadwing's head to the side, the eyeballs have actually snapped off and broken off, leaving Dreadwing eyeless and blind. And the ball joint is much more loose on Skyquake, so you can rotate his head left and right without fear of breaking the eyeballs. But I actually found that out before I found Dreadwing, and so I've never rotated his head left or right, and I can actually feel it when I transform him, that even if I move the head ever so slightly, it feels like that neck joint doesn't want to go anywhere. So yeah, for both the Transformers Prime Voyager class and the Legacy Evolution Leader class versions of Dreadwing and Skyquake, the original versions of the molds have QC issues that the second releases were fixed by Hasbro and Takara Tomy. So yeah, it is a shame that between both versions, the original versions of the molds have QC issues that weren't resolved until the second releases of them. But yeah, the greatest legacy for Dreadwing and Skyquake is that they both died by the end of Season 2 of the Transformers Prime cartoon. Skyquake only lasted one episode. Dreadwing lasted a little longer, but then when he found out that Megatron was the one who actually murdered Skyquake, he betrayed the Decepticons, and Megatron ended up murdering him as well. So yeah, Dreadwing and Skyquake found out the wrong way that you fail to do what Megatron says, then he will punish you as severely as he can. But despite Skyquake not transforming properly, I do not regret getting him, and I'm really happy to have both him and Dreadwing here in Leader Class form. Even though they aren't that much larger than the Voyager class figures from Transformers Prime, they are large enough that as Dreadwing falls over, you can see that it is a bit of a size difference between the Voyager class and Leader class figures. So yeah, they are definitely a size class larger than their Transformers Prime action figures. So for the final proverbial question, do I recommend getting the Transformers Legacy Evolution Leader Class Skyquake and Dreadwing action figures and adding them to your Transformers collections? I absolutely do. You cannot go wrong having the Legacy Evolution versions of Dreadwing and Skyquake in your Transformers collection. I'm upset with myself that I made these guys the last. These guys are technically the last Leader Class figures from the Legacy line that I had yet to still review. So with Dreadwing and Skyquake now reviewed, I have looked at every Leader Class figure in the entire Transformers Legacy trilogy, and yeah, I highly recommend you get these guys if you can find them. From what I've seen on Amazon and other websites, because Hasbro and Takara Tomy fixed the backpack transformation for Dreadwing, he is the rare and more hard to find version of these two. Skyquake is still readily available on most websites. Whether or not the backpack has been modified on Skyquake or not is uncertain for me. I honestly don't know. But I hope the rumor I heard was true and that later releases did have the backpack mod, just like Dreadwing. But even if it is true and there are variations of Skyquake that can transform correctly, there's no guarantee you're going to get a version of Skyquake that is able to transform properly and not have a floppy backpack. And considering the fact that as of this video's recording it's 2025 and these figures came out 2 years ago in 2023, even though these guys were released more than once during the Legacy Evolution line, and we have been getting some Transformers action figures that re-releases. I personally doubt that these two leader class figures of Skyquake and Dreadwing are on Hasbro's list of Transformers action figures to re-release. But yeah, so thank you guys all so much for watching. This has been the TF Fan Geek. I didn't want the review to last as long as it did, but it's what it is. There is a lot to say about Skyquake and Dreadwing when you look at them. And yeah, they are among my favorite Decepticons from the Transformers Prime series, despite, again, the short time that they had on screen. So thank you guys all so much for watching. This has been the TF Fan Geek, and until next time, you guys, please remember to stay safe, stay healthy, transform and roll out. This has been my review of Transformers Legacy Evolution Leader Class, Dreadwing and Skyquake. Thank you guys all so much. Thank you for your continued support. And until next time, you guys, goodbye. Transform and roll out.